I would like to introduce our next speaker. We are very lucky to have her. She got in last night. Kiki Seror grew up in the south of France, and she has spent her artistic life around the world, in various places around the world, exploring the ideas of community and self. And you lived in New York for what, about 25 years, you said? 20 years? Yeah. Before she decided to move out to Joshua Tree in the south of California, out in the desert. There's an artistic community out there. She's a professor at Copper Mountain College. She teaches art history, and photography there. But Kiki's here to share with us a little bit about the impact of the digital technological revolution on our lives and our world. I knew not too long ago I was watching a TED Talk where as the guy was talking, in the background a 3D printer was printing out a new kidney that was actually going to then be transplanted into a young man. And I realized that technology is so far beyond our grasp sometimes. It's so difficult for us to even imagine what technology is about that we need to turn to some experts, especially in the art world, where, as you'll hear from Kiki, we have a lot to learn. Now, Kiki got her BFA in Fine Arts at the Art Institute of Chicago. She went to the Columbia University School of the Arts for her MFA. She has an exhibition history that is extensive, and I'll just give you some of the highlights. More than 20 solo exhibitions. She's been in more than 100 exhibitions around the world. Site Santa Fe, New York. She's currently represented by the CB1 Gallery in Los Angeles, by the I-20 Gallery in New York, represented by a gallery in Tenerife, Spain, and she's been in exhibits everywhere from Moscow to Amsterdam to New York, and we're lucky to have her with us this morning. Kiki Seror.
Alrighty, yes, thank you so much, Kathy and AWA, for inviting me here today to speak about 3D printing. And I'll start by you did such a great job introducing who I am, and so I am Kiki Seror, and I'm a trained painter. I started at the Art Institute of Chicago painting and photography, experimental media per se, and when I ended up at Columbia University doing my thesis, my terminal degree, there was a little thing going on called Photoshop, new technology, and we didn't have classes in any of that. That was not given. You don't take a class, you kind of still don't. So I kind of learned it on my own. And I've always taken that kind of experimental approach when it comes to new technology. So in a way, whenever, yes?
We're just going to get you to stand at the podium because we're also live streaming.
I'm so sorry. Can you hear me now? Can everyone hear me? Okay. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay, and as I was saying, so, I work, my work tends to be extremely experimental. If there's a new media out there, a new way of printing, I want to try it. I look for the errors, and I look to perfect it as well. But as soon as I perfect something, I kind of let it go. So here you go. What I'm going to start with is work that I've done myself using this 3D technology, 3D printing technology. Here you're going to see sculptures, and these are the sculptures when they were still on my desktop, before they were printed into the reel. And so what you're looking at are multiple views. You're looking from the right to the left, to the top, to the bottom of the piece. Okay. There we go. A little bit more of a close-up of one of these pieces, and the next slides I'll be showing you when they came out, what they look like in the reel, in an installation. There you go. So they came out, I used a plastic, an APS plastic, and I'll get into what that kind of stands for. It's a clear plastic at the time. This technology, this is back from 2008. these sculptures were made about 7 years ago. And at the time, we were not able to do a glass laser sintering like we are able to now. MIT, you sent me a wonderful article on that. This process now has been developed at MIT, and it will be on the market pretty shortly. So, and here's another piece, another of the sculptures. And they are on a light box, but on the bottom light box. The pedestal itself is a light box. So, enough about me. Let's get into, and I'm here really to talk to you guys about explaining to you what this 3D process is. How many of you here are sculptors, photographers, painters? Everyone can use it. See what I mean? We're all here. We can all take advantage. And I'm going to start maybe at, I'm going to start at the 15th century, huh? Gutenberg and this press. What I want to go back to this basic is what this really meant for us. You know, this meant that language, that information could be printed and be given to a mass audience, mass public. It brought about the vernacular language. And I'm going to try to, let's see, from the Gutenberg to the 3D printing, everything in between, and the goods and the bads, like new technology, even the camera itself. For every good the camera brought us, it also did bring us some negativity, some things to be cautious of. So what is printing? As we know, we've all printed, right? From our inkjet printer. We've all done like one at least JPEG from a friend, from a child, okay. So, you know, printing process is the reproduction, or it has been, the reproduction of text, image, typically with ink on paper, from the Gutenberg to Xerox. Okay, so what is 3D printing? You know, it is using a general purpose machine to create a physical object where the design of the structure is provided to the machine at a build time. Usually the object is additive, meaning what I love about this concept is, to me, it's almost like sculpture has become photography. It is built, layers, thin layers, just like a photograph is. And in a volumetric sense, and so it's built up compared to an older version of sculpting that was used in mechanical engineering for a very long time, which is CNC. And usually with the CNC process, what you have are algorithms, components that you are given a block, and it's a reductive process. So 3D printing is additive, while CNC is a subtractive. Very much like a sculptor who uses clay versus a sculptor who uses marble. Okay, so one is additive. The clay, the ceramist, the clay sculptor is adding on that clay, building up the form, while the marble, that sculptor is chipping away to the image. Okay. How did we make things before this 3D technology came about? So we carved out the part with the wood or plaster, and we carved the internal structure as well. We had a process essentially called mold making. And so this, in a way, has taken away the necessity for all of these steps to happen. But 3D printing is easy. However, the modeling is a little bit more difficult. And I'm going to go now into try to simplify or try to introduce to you certain softwares that a lot of them are free. They are they're under the Common Creative License. You can download and you can just play. And I'm saying, I taught myself basically the desktop, the Photoshops, the Adobe Suite, and I started playing with I got a license through Columbia University at the time, Lightwave, new tech Lightwave, and you can go through it, and you can, there's nothing wrong with making the mistakes. You know, if you're, what I actually love, what I learned is by working, is making that mistake, I own that mistake at least. And let me go back into it and rework it. So let me just introduce you. So this is the issue. I mean, this looks scary, right, to you guys when I say first there's a CAD model, then we put it to an STL file, then the slicing software, which is the print itself, the printing, the layer slice, 3D printer, and then we have the object. So let me explain to you a little bit differently how it works. First, we have the idea of the piece we want to make. Then we put it in Modeler. Sorry, it's cropping a little bit. Modeler, there's an EL at the end of that word. The machine code, so whatever image you're seeing, whatever image that you're working on in the software, the machine itself will give it an algorithm, a mathematical equation that will then the printer will calculate and give you your finished object. So what I'm going to do today is go backwards. I want to talk first about the object, then the machine code, then the model, and get back to the idea. And we're going to get back to ideas. I'm going to introduce you to artists who are working with the idea and concept of 3D printing in their contemporary work. So the object itself, the finished object. The finished object starts and ends in a 3D space, right? And in a 3D space, in your software, it's called Cartesian coordinates. You have an X, Y, Z space. Your Z space is your real space. It goes back and forth, me and you. This space right here. Your Y space is your horizontal line. Your X space is essentially your vertical. And this is the printer. So your printer also is, in a way, it has a chamber, an XYZ space. So you're building an object that is volumetric, and essentially your printer also has is volumetric. There's a chamber inside in which your object will come about and will, almost like the latent image that we have in photography, we have that now with sculpture. Alrighty, and about the material used itself. So many more materials. I was just saying, glass is now going to be available. There's a filament. A filament is a material, what it is made of. Plastics, what kind of plastics, rubbers, even edibles. They're making with food, with chocolates. And we also need some sacrificial materials. It works well when it's chocolates, meaning sometimes you need to use extra in order to pull away the object properly without any kind of without harming the object itself. So this is a powder bed printing, and what happens here is that the powders are all, you have your chamber, and all this powder is in a way, what's the word? It is suspended in the chamber with air, and you have these lasers that are coming at an XYZ point, and when the laser hits the XYZ space, that piece of those particles will be fused together in space, and this is one of the methods. Another method is the photocured, in which what happens is that the lasers are actually going into the water, and you're printing a layer by layer up. Yes, photocured. And then there's a CNC milling you're starting with a solid piece, and you're carving away very much. I was thinking like with the the sculptors when they're pounding at marble away. Okay, let's talk a bit about the machine code. So we're going backwards. So here we go, machine code. Let's go back as well. When you have your object that first exists in a XYZ space, you want to look at it. Remember those images that I showed you in the very beginning of my piece? That I was able to look at it down from on top. So you're able to look at it in a 360 degrees, but on a screen. And so it's very important for a person to be able to utilize these the widgets in order to go around the piece inside. However, you get to see it that way, but your computer, the language, the algorithm, it's only mathematical. So the computer is only reading this by zeros and ones, the code that either an STL, an OBG, or a G code will attribute, depending on the software you're using, or your output process. Does anybody use? Anyone knows what a pixel is? Right, exactly, with Photoshop. So a pixel has all that information in that one image, right? So the more pixels you have, the more information you have about pertaining to your photograph. This does not have any pixels. This is all mathematical code. We're lucky that there's so much software, and even the software I'm telling you to download for free, and I'll give you some sites to go to. It's user-friendly. The user interface, the UI, is very friendly. You want a ball, you want a square, you want texture, and you just can click on that, essentially. There is a sense, unfortunately, I'm not a coder. I'm not interested in coding. I'm interested I'm not interested in the vocabulary. I'm a poet with this language. You see what I mean? And I think that's what artists are. We take it, we break it, like a hacker. And then we make it, we make something cool out of it. So. And as these are simple shapes, a lot of them, but I like the idea of sometimes just something so simple, and the lack of, in a way, it's a lack of control with something so simple. Can I make it difficult? Can I start from a simple place and build the layers? Okay, let's talk about the model. So here it is. This is Modeler, and these are a lot of the software programs. Not all of them are free. 3D Studio Max cost, AutoCAD cost. However, Blender, Rhino, SketchUp, if there's any faculty here, if there's any teachers, you can get a free teacher's license. You write to them. They're in the Bay Area, and they'll give you a number. And Maya. So the three first top ones, Studio Max, AutoCAD, Maya, runs you about $12,000 a year for a license. The other ones are free. And I really believe we kind of live in that kind of society. It's either extremely expensive or free. What happened to the middle class here? I don't know. There's no more in between, unfortunately. Especially as we all go more towards this kind of digital practice. And I still draw and paint every day almost. I need to. And then there's OpenCAD, open source CAD. This is a very interesting program. I know some of the people that started this from Columbia University. It's also available for free. What's nice about this, it's not so much, the other softwares are also used for people in the movie industry to make movies, to make videos. This is specifically for those who just want to make the object. So either artists, sculptors, or in Columbia University, in many cases, their medical department. And but this is also available free to use. So open source CAD. Yeah, 2-3D design, and here I'm now going to talk about, there are some actual, you can actually get some libraries. We have now, some of the libraries in the world are starting to scan their collections, especially artifacts of antiquity, and you can actually obtain them for study, to look at them. And they're scanning antiquity. Some people are scanning themselves. 123 Catch is, in a way, the computer, the XYZ space, has this built-in camera that you can actually build and go around you. And there, on the very bottom, you see how that composite, how the image of the man has been composited from the from the photographs that were taken individually on that path. And you can do it with an artifact as well. When you are, There are two ways that people use this 3D software in order to then have an output 3D printing. You can either start from nothing, very much like a painter, 2D person. They start with a blank canvas. So you start with nothing and you add in, or you could be like a photographer. Photographers edit the world, right, within that frame. And here I'm showing you, this is then to bring something that already exists into this 3D space. And so when you're scanning, and they use laser scans. Scanning it with a laser is a little bit different than your optical. What you and I are used to is an actual image that's being taken. These are lasers that are being sent out from a certain distance and brought back to the same laser that sent it out. And that time period, that distance is how it reads, you know, the space, like the shape, the volume of the space, of the form that it is scanning. From a 3D. So what I was saying is that it takes a lot. I mean, this is not just an easy format to do. When institutions, universities, and museums are scanning, they have a crew of people who have to clean up the polygons that are all around it. It's not as easy as Photoshop that you can just like, okay, let me erase this part, let me erase that part. They're actually, in a way, cutting through mathematical language, what not to include in the image and what to include. So there is still an element of the human judgment here. We're not, you know, letting the computer or the software completely say, oh no, I know exactly what to do. You couldn't do this without the judgment of a person behind, an operator behind the software. And so here you have a Chinese bronze vessel that's been scanned, and now it exists in a 3D. You know, you know, God, should anything happen, earthquake or something, we'll still have a replica. We'll still have some sort of a documentation of humanity and what we make. And the detail, depending on whether or not you use a consumer printer, or an industrial printer, meaning a consumer printer, they start now at about $800, as opposed to a professional printer would cost you anywhere from $15,000 to $150,000. So, but this is, you know, from an institution, a museum, so they're going to have the higher scanners. And you can, see what's even inside. And you see this widget on the upper right-hand side. I'm just showing you right now. The computer is looking from the left, bottom left, so we're looking up at the piece, and now we're looking on the topographically from the top down. Okay, and you get to rotate this object. What's crazy is to think that it does exist, but based on a bunch of algorithms, a bunch of mathematical code. And here we have, I mean, we're now even, some foundations, like the Henry Moore Foundation, they want this technology to scan the Henry Moore pieces. And this is a challenge. This is a huge piece. Beforehand, you know, we were dealing with a chamber. The little sculptures you saw of mine, they're only 5 inches by 6 inches. We're dealing now with a piece that's about 5 feet by 7 feet. And again, through the laser scanning, it's a camera and gets to laser it, laser the piece. However, when it comes back, someone's got to clean out that piece. So here you have it. People are starting to, you know, you see how they're cutting away. The Meadmore curl, 19. Okay, and what's interesting? What? The Thingiverse, yeah. Thingiverse is fun, and this is something. If anyone's, you know, it's just curious, and I'm here in a way to introduce to everybody my curiosity to yours. And if anyone is curious, please download one of these, freewares. And then you can go, there's so many sites that have their own libraries that you can import. It's not going to be high resolution. So if there's guilt, like, oh my God, I don't want to take somebody's work, there's authors out there who are giving this for you. This is a shared community online. It's a mashup culture we live in. And with the Creative Commons, a lot of us want to share each other's, share so we can help somebody else not have the struggles we've had or have the accomplishments that we've had. And so with Thingiverse, you can actually get some models, bring them into your software, and manipulate them. Earth, no sea, relief globe. You can play with it. Okay, let's talk about some design issues. And and this again goes to a way about thinking about output and the limitation, the physical limitation of the printer itself. This, for instance, is an ideal overlap angle as opposed to the one to the right. When you have lasers coming in, they're not coming in at diagonals, they're coming in straight across, like this. So if you were to do this, if you wanted to construct this piece, you're going to want to not put it into your file to be printed as such on a diagonal. It's going to be hard for those lasers to go around it, and you're going to want it, on a simple XYZ space. Just things like that. I wanted to introduce you to just the way that we have to overthink things sometimes, or how to perceive, like how to create something, how to go about doing it, and making sure though that you are talking to a output, you are talking to a printer, very much the same way that someone would be to do a wax sculpture and then want to cast it in bronze. There's concerns. There's still physical concerns. This is not magic trick. And for instance, this piece, that one little dot on the point, it's gonna fall in your printer. It's not good. You would want to print it upside down. Yeah. Meshes. I'm gonna go through this a little faster. Here we go. So I know we have somebody after me who's going to be speaking about especially copyright issues and all that. And with new technology, always comes up the issues about how it's going to be used. New responsibilities, new language that we don't even know, we don't know that we don't have yet. So. With 3D printing, there are some controversies. Guns or other restricted things can now be printed, technically, or supposedly. 3D printers mean anyone can make anything, whether or not the government likes it. Again, kind of referring to guns. As long as it's made of plastics and the size of a loaf of bread. And I was saying that a lot of the consumer printer model types, their chambers are kind of a little bit bigger, but they're about now maybe 6 inches by 8 inches. So you can make an object about like this. And 3D printing guns are not very good guns, and people make bombs out of pipes. That's another thing I want to get to. The hammer. The hammer can be a very good tool. It builds homes, it builds houses. Yet it also could be, do we blame the operator or do we blame the tool? Is kind of what I want to say pertaining to that issue. And also, of course, the controversies are going to be information ownership. Many corporations are identifiable by their physical products. A Coca-Cola bottle has a certain shape. And technically, a person now can go ahead, scan that bottle, and reproduce it. So, 3D printing in art. Now, before I go introducing you contemporary artists who are using this medium, do we have any questions just about the technology itself?
Probably 6 million.
I know. I'm giving everybody my email at the end of this lecture. If you guys come up, you can always get a hold of me. I'm very accessible. Okay, so I'm going to continue now introducing you to artists. And Marcus Kaiser, he's actually making, he is doing sand, he's making sand into glass and making these beautiful vessels in the desert by himself. he's got this whole contraption. He's using solar power in order to run his 3D printer, and there he's making a beautiful glass blown, in a way, pieces. There you go. A little rough, but I think the beauty, the struggle of a one person being able to do this is astounding. We have Tom Burtonwood, and he kind of runs an open source of art history. You can go to his website, and these are, in a way, open source, meaning that he has gotten them from other cultures, and you can obtain some of these files to manipulate or to add on to his art historical history. And in many ways, he's rewriting history with these objects. And here you go. You can even get a Marcel Duchamp piece. He's giving you an art mud piece that you can scan. After all, wouldn't Duchamp want this? The man who gave us the found object, l'objet trouvé, the ready-made. This is Duchamp. Duchamp is rolling in his grave. And we even have an artist who's hacking the Met. Is he really hacking? So Cosmo Wieman, he is actually going around the world scanning famous sculptures, getting their algorithms, getting their code, bringing them back, and trying to re-put them together. In a way, let me bring this home. And let me tell you, I teach the history of art, and especially when it comes to sculpture. What I would do to be able to articulate, to teach, especially the history of sculpture to my students with an actual 3D product. I'm not too concerned about him reproducing this. After all, for me, the object is all about its contents, right? If you're getting the Pieta or a Donatello piece, and you just have a little reproduction of it, it's still not going to be the same as going to Italy, to Florence, and to seeing the piece in its real, where it was made for the cathedral it was made in. So, yeah. And some more that he is victory. Yeah, he's scanning them. Sophie Kahn is actually scanning as well, parts, bodies, contemporary people, portraits, but in a way it's, she is really loving the faults. You see, when things do not match up, and giving a sense of, even though we live in this, we're all cyborgs, this post-human, digital age, there's a fragility. How fragile we are, not just in flesh, but we're even very fragile while in mesh. Instrument design is being used, is being printed. You too can have something that was beautifully scanned from the Orient, something from Morocco, and now have it scanned and printed up in silver. Alethea Framis, she's actually visualizing sound. When I know, the poetry that comes around voice, around, the whisper of a lover or whatnot. And now, especially with our digitized day and age, we know that most music files, unfortunately, like MP3s and all that, we're listening to music all with code, right? Well, she's actually taking people's voices real time, coding it right away, and you get to see what your breath looks like, what a word looks like, based on your pitch, based perhaps or on an accent. I know her personally, and she is from Barcelona, and now she's living in Holland, in Amsterdam, and she's had the hardest time speaking Dutch. And I think this project actually comes out of her struggles with enunciation. And now she tells some Dutch people, like, here, this is what I mean, look at it. Okay, and of course, the obvious, and where I think it's been most influential and we've seen, is in architecture. right? But CAD was being used already, since the late 80s as a tool for architects, but now architects are actually printing lighter materials that are stronger than ever. And so the future of what we think of as a structure to inhabit our bodies, and to represent our culture is going to change. Based on a honeycomb. This kind of architecture is just based on information that we've gathered through scanning a beehive, a honeycomb, and then how do we apply it for ourselves, for our own use. And so from architecture, is that gorgeous? Or just a lampshade, for interior design. Or the bottom of our feet. Having one of these in cowboy boots is excellent. That's the way to do it. Chairs. And so Barry and Ball, you can go to their website. He kind of has a manifesto about hacking and remixing. What happened within the music industry about a good 10 years ago, when we were able to start to upload and download and share information and files, well, some artists are doing that now with pieces of well-known works. Richard DuPont, New York artist, scans his own body. So he got to go. He had a pretty lucky doctor, because a CAT scan like this could cost a lot of money. But he was able to go and get his whole body scanned, and had that file, brought it back into his, I think he's probably using AutoCAD, and with that DXF file, manipulated his own body aesthetically. What it would be like if I was like arrays of like static, TV static, and then he reprints his body up. But this is his, these are his self-portraits of himself. And from the architecture we saw, and that honeycomb, how it's even influenced fashion, I think is just fantastic. To me, fashion and the act of cloth, the whole knitting process, the histories of that, and now how we're looking at even different shells, how we're influenced by perhaps, it's like Blade Runner, the shell of the serpent is all now being used for actual clothing. Alethea Framis also, actually, another piece she did pertaining to this, she used bulletproof fabric for dresses for women of minority, and I'm thinking about this today. And she was having a woman of minority in sports arena fields in Europe, dealing with the hatred crimes that happen towards minority women, and in sports field where football can be very aggressive, and just thinking about everything that's been happening in Europe the last 24 hours. Beads. Okay, and I am going to. This is an interesting, now this process is about 3D printing. This is an output. However, I don't know if you've heard of this artist, Heather Dewey. She's gone around the New York City subways and has found gum. Underneath, gum thrown out, gum on the floor. Yes, she's had the gum analyzed, DNA extracted from it, from which these were the people chewing that gum. Talk about, were you here on a Saturday night? Did I know? Yeah. So I'll go back with the 3D printing in art history, art archaeology, And you know, these are modes of representation and how it's helping actually museums and institutions when things have been broken, when you know things have been found through archaeology to make to understand where, for instance, where you know this piece, we now get to see perhaps the missing piece. So we're filling in gaps of history that were never there before. Another friend, yeah, 3D printing at Columbia. These are the scans that they're doing. You guys can go to this website. And then the future of 3D printing. We'll probably, I cannot wait to see 3D printers, the arms, the way that we have construction sites. Now, when you see, you know, the building of buildings, imagine a huge laser on site constructing a, yeah, oh, it's fun, in concrete, a piece. I like to see it done in the sand, actually. If me living in the desert, having one of those, having a glass house built in the, you know, from its sand. Yeah. Biomedical engineering. This is going to revolutionize. Nowadays, we get, you know, if there's a heart transplant needed, a kidney transplant needed, they will have the actual technology they're going to be using, starting with a blueprint of your own tissue, starting with your own blueprint of your own organ part, and then with your cells, being able to graft your cells and rebuild if they want. I know this is sci-fi, and I don't know what, you know, if this is really going to happen, but, and they're going to be able to rebuild kidneys, hearts, and it's what they're saying, it's what they're looking for. This is the way people are, you know, this is really now away from art, but I wonder as artists, how does that affect what we think of humanity and temporalness? So. Yeah, and then I'm gonna end with food in space. Or food anywhere, or perhaps there'll be a new cuisine. And yeah, and so again, the desktop, you know, I don't want people to be too concerned about, oh God, you know, something's, perhaps one of my pieces can be ripped off. These kinds of industrial printers that you see to your far right, the ones I'm using, those are starting at $50,000, if not more. And we are still in the 3D modeling, 3D printing process. We're still not even at 72 DPI. If you know what you know, in the photography, we're over at 300, 1200 when you want your output to be a professional Chrome photograph. In the 3D, we're still basically at about 72 DPI. And that's, yeah. So, thank you so much for letting me introduce what I think about. And please contact me if you have any questions.
Are there any questions?
Yes,
Right
or now.
We've got time for one or two here. You probably have 5,000 questions.
Please email me. I mean, that's why, yeah. I get to be a little shy.
I think the whole idea of what is an original is, you know, is really a fascinating question for artists out of this.
It is, and I think we're the ones who are going to be the most sensitive. We're the most sensitive to it because we have the dialogue already through Duchamp, through what is the original, you know, the ready-made. We've been living conceptually with it. Now we have to answer to the physical. Yeah, it's going to be a change. However, I do believe that you cannot remove the work from its context, meaning where it's meant to be seen. Again, I'm so sorry. Also, for instance, I'm a digital artist. I have a when it comes to the law and when collectors buy my work, I have a certificate of authenticity that accompanies my work. And I also have the authenticity encrypted in my video files. There are ways, we are doing things, so even if I do want to share with somebody, there's a watermark that's hidden. Very much, or if anybody uses Bridge, that you can look in the data files as to when it was taken, by whom. So we are capable of encrypting that kind of ownership. It's just harder to look at. But, again, teaching art history, I know how artists, like scientists, we speak to each other from generation to generation, and we are influenced. Now, whether or not someone actually rips somebody else off, you're right, I'm completely against that. But yet I want us to influence each other and not to be worried about what we take. You can take any of my files. I know whatever you guys would do with them would be completely different and would only elevate my voice and my thought from that day into now what you want to do with it. Yeah, okay. Any other questions? Or did that answer?
No, yeah, I just think it's
It's amazing, yeah.
Yeah. I'd be curious about toxicities with some of the, with the lasers, with the filaments you were talking about. Have you looked into that at all?
I have, and those chambers are very well sealed, let me tell you. But you go in, you do, they're very well sealed. And nowadays with OSHA, you cannot get, one of these printers could not be on the market if there was going to be them capable of leaking. It just doesn't happen. There was more problems. Why I'm like now cannot think. When I developed color photography in high school, that was dangerous. This is not. So, yes.
If Henry Moore's sculpture is going to be printed, do they have, or Michelangelo's David,
Yes.
do they have to have print pieces?
Yes.
Together?
Yes, they still do. They still do, and that is why, you know, and you see it. You know, you see where it's been very much like a Photoshop. You know, you see the composite, you see the synthetic. Now, what I'm enjoying with some contemporary artists, how they are taking the synthetic, the composite, as part of their language. But even so, even photography, the first composite photo was in 1860. You know, when they used two negatives and printed on one piece, a sky and this ocean, because there was two different ways of exposing to get the right exposure. You still cannot make it that big with that. You can actually, but without high DPI, without high resolution. So if you want one thing, you gotta give up the other. You can reproduce it this small, really high DPI, but it's only this small. So, yes.
The ancient bronze vessel that was printed.
Yes.
What material was the reproduction?
Oh, that was never reprinted. That was kept in its DXF file. From my knowledge, it was never reproduced. That is more of a form of documentation, in a way of creating a digital, a 3D library, not just information of words like a book library, but an actual library of physicality. Yeah, and you can still tell by its carbon coding, carbon age as to when something was made. You know, I mean, they're still in the 3D printing. Those are still plastics that unfortunately I just made, you know, today. So, well, I thank you so much. Thank you.